Welcome back to the Creative Community Podcast presented by Destination Arete. I'm David, and this week I'm joined by one of my longtime friends, Mareena. I think we met in second grade for the first time, and then maybe didn't know each other as well until later in high school, became better friends, and then went to the same college and live in the same town and eat at the same restaurants on purpose together sometimes. So Mareena loves books, and she's been the one to introduce books to me. And then I'm also joined by my friend Caroline, who I probably didn't meet in second grade, but have known for a fair amount of time. Yeah. So I'm excited because both Caroline and Mareena love books and are good friends of mine. And Caroline, when you found out that we were doing fictional characters this year, did you have any like initial thoughts, or was there anyone that you were like, I hope they get included, or I wonder if they'll, remember to include this character, or anything that you thought about like that?
I was definitely super excited because I know in the past few years we've done like Disney, you guys have done like Disney stuff, and that's always super fun. But this is also super fun, and just seeing the different variety of characters you guys had picked out, I think was super cool. And I mean, for me, I was like, there's got to be some Jane Austen characters, and there's a good amount of Jane Austen characters. So I'm happy. Scarlett Pimpernel, I'm happy. We got Nancy Drew and Frank Hardy in here. I'm happy. So I love it. I love this bracket.
I'm glad to hear it. Mareena, was there anyone you felt like was overrepresented, or someone who got left out that you felt like, why weren't they included?
There's a lot of To Kill a Mockingbird, which I did read. And then there's some like moral thing where you're like, oh, it's a really good book. I gotta put them forward in the bracket, I guess. I felt like they were maybe a little overrepresented, honestly. I mean, it's so hard. I don't know how you guys picked it, honestly, because I'm thinking of a couple, like, there's a mix of, it's mostly classics, right? You're trying to get someone that like everyone's gonna know, but then you miss out on some of like the fun newer ones. Was Percy Jackson in here? Like,
he was.
Okay, I thought he was. So there was some newer fun stuff. Harry Potter?
He was in here. He lost in the first round. Hermione was not. We had Harry Potter and Dumbledore, but we did not have.
See, that's the thing. Dumbledore is a kind of a lame character, and Harry is just okay. If you had had like Hermione or like Sirius Black, I feel like I could have helped direct that a little more. It's fine. That's what I would say for underrepresentation, overrepresentation. Jane Austen was perfectly represented. I just want to make that clear.
Okay. That was going to be my next question. Well, speaking of Jane Austen, the first region that we're going to talk about is our Sir Arthur Conan Doyle region, in which his main character, Sherlock Holmes, lost to Aslan, 126 to 61, basically doubled up the score. And then for Jane Austen, her character Emma defeated the Cat in the Hat, 112 to 66. Caroline, you were shaking your head a little bit at the Aslan Sherlock Holmes result. Did you have any strong feelings either way on that one?
I mean, I was pulling for my homeboy Sherlock Holmes all the way, but I mean, I don't know. I was a little bit surprised, but also not, like Sherlock Holmes, a classic, the OG detective. But also Aslan, are we allowed to vote against him? So
I did.
Mareena, why would you have picked Sherlock Holmes over Aslan?
This is going to sound sacrilegious, and I don't mean it in that way. But Sherlock has much more like depth of character, and we've had so many different iterations of Sherlock because there's just that like kind of like field to mine there. There's just one Aslan, and that's okay. But like, I just feel like Sherlock Holmes is very much like almost like a Shakespearean character where you see it again and again and again. You see that Romeo and Juliet over and over again, and we see Sherlock, or that idea of Sherlock, again and again. And so that's where I'm like, there's just much more there in the literature than you get with Aslan, because Aslan gets to like peace out for like most of the books and then show up at the end and be like, gotcha. Which fair. But yeah, I just feel like if we're talking like literary character and interesting literary character, Sherlock would win.
Well, Aslan is the only C.S. Lewis character in the entire field of 64, but Sherlock is also the only Sir Arthur Conan Doyle character in the entire field of 64.
Well, I mean, who has more of a library? Like, who sold more books? But I can see how people have that attachment to C.S. Lewis and the Chronicles of Narnia, and maybe it's not so much that Aslan won, It's that someone was like, oh, I just love The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe growing up. It was one of my favorite books. And so like I picked that one, where Sherlock has had kind of like a resurgence in the past 10 years, I think.
Sure. I lied. Mr. Tumnus was also in the field, but he had already lost by this round. So Caroline, Emma defeated Cat in the Hat. Do you feel like that's fair? Like, are you an Emma fan like most of the other people that have been on this show?
Yeah.
Okay.
I am. I love the book. I love her character and just the development that she has in the book. And I mean, the Cat in the Hat is fun. We all love the Cat in the Hat, but I wasn't really surprised with that win. I definitely had picked Emma to go forward. So
were you surprised that Emma defeated Edmond Dantes the round before?
Maybe a little bit, but I feel like, so for me, I had just read The Count of Monte Cristo, I think this past year. So I feel like maybe Jane Austen has, maybe I'm completely wrong, but maybe she has like a wider fan base. I'm thinking, more people are familiar with Emma than Edmond Dante. So, I mean, maybe that's completely off base. Was it a close matchup? I can't remember. Were the votes close?
The Emma and Edmund vote was 109 to 74. So
Yeah,
really.
So I mean, I definitely expected Emma to win that matchup, I think, but I don't know if it would. I feel like it might have been closer than that. But
Mareena, do you have any Edmond Dantes input before we move to the Milne region?
Like, if you were following the Instagram story of Destination, which I'm not gonna butcher this name, you know it. If you followed the Instagram and they asked if you were sad about anyone that lost, and someone got posted twice posting about Edmond Dantes, it was me. So just to put that in perspective, I love that book and I love that character, and it's just so interesting, like such an interesting book to read. And I also love Emma. It's a really great book to read, but you spend a lot of Emma like kind of hating Emma because she's kind of the worst. And I do love her character development, but there's something just so dark and interesting about Edmond Dante that like, that's why I would have picked him. Is again, I find him more interesting and like more to think about with his character than I think with Emma. But
I read The Count of Monte Cristo at like the perfect time in life. It was like right before I fell out of the reading habit. And the only thing that stands out to me about it, like the number one thing, is that if you ever wanted to know how to begin a book, it's The Count of Monte Cristo, because you read that first chapter and you think to yourself, I've died, nothing else can happen for the rest of the next 72 hours. I'm finishing this book. Like
I think I also read it, like you sat and just was like, oh
yeah.
my gosh.
You're on the edge of your seat. So, all right. Well, we will see if Emma or Aslan comes out of this round in the coming days. So the next region, the Milne region, Winnie the Pooh defeated Samwise Gamgee 115 to 111. Second closest matchup we've had so far this bracket. And then Gandalf upset Fitzwilliam Darcy 127 to 100. Both of you have mixed emotions about these matchups. I can already tell. Mareena, how do you feel about Samwise falling to this bear of very little brain?
I hate it. I hate it so much. I'm sorry. Like, I appreciate Winnie the Pooh, but of all the Winnie the Pooh characters, I appreciate Pooh the least. Like, truly, he's just a dumb bear that loves honey. Like, I'm sorry to put him in his simplest terms. And like, I remember, growing up as we did, I had watched Lord of the Rings once, and I had asked my dad if I could watch it again because friends were watching it. It might have even been at your house. And he said, "Why would you ever need to watch it again?" And I said, "Huh?" And he was like, "I need you to give me like 3 reasons why you would need to watch it again." And number 1 reason was the power of friendship as shown by Samwise Gamgee. And I just feel like he is such a, like, I do think matching him up to Pooh was weirdly like, because at the front of it, he just seems like a little hobbit who loves to eat. And then it turns into this insane thing where he is on this giant journey and he is carrying Mr. Frodo to the top of Mount Doom. And like, he is a true friend. He's the guy that you'd want to have your back. And he's the guy I picked to go ahead in this bracket. So I don't like this.
You could say that Pooh's journey to Skull to save Christopher Robin was similar to Samwise's journey to Mount Doom to save humanity.
No. Because Pooh didn't make that journey alone, and he was not the person that got them all there eventually. All
right.
It was the same to Mount School.
Caroline, I want to switch gears and we'll come back to this one, but Gandalf defeating Jane Austen's maybe best hero, best male protagonist. How did you feel when you saw that result? I think you might have even texted me on Instagram.
I think I did. I sent you a little Instagram message. I think I said I was very upset at this upset, I think is what I said. I was, yes, very sad, but I don't know that I was necessarily surprised. I feel like it was a toss-up for me just because, okay, we talked about Jane Austen has a big fan base, but The Lord of the Rings also has a very big fan base, and Gandalf is just like Gandalf, you know? So I was like, this one could go either way. Obviously, I'm throwing in my votes for Darcy, but could go either way, and it just didn't go my way this time.
Gandalf, once again, a character that just gets to skip town for a couple books and then show up again. So we have another issue where maybe scarcity, maybe absence makes the heart grow fonder. Mr. Darcy is just the focal point of this whole book. I had a comment that I wanted to tell you about Mr. Darcy. Somebody said he is the worst of Jane Austen's characters because he is like, I love you, JK, I don't. Okay, now let's get together. And I felt like that was an oversimplification, but I didn't know if you had any defense for why he could have beaten Gandalf and moved on to the next round.
I have never read Lord of the Rings. I have only watched them, and I'm going to be honest, when I watch them, I always end up slightly confused because all of their names sound the same to me. This is just transparency.
She's about to tell us that
I have watched them multiple times. The first time I watched them was with Mareena. You remember when we had literally one day, all of them? That was fun. I loved it. I've watched them multiple times and I definitely enjoy them, and I want to watch them again and I want to read them. So I don't know as much about the Lord of the Rings. And so for me, when I was, choosing my bracket, I was going off of what I like the characters I loved and the characters I have nostalgia with. So obviously Darcy for me, and just your comment about he, like what you were saying, someone mentioned I love you, JK, I don't. Oh wait, I do. I don't think it's that. I don't think it's so much that. I think it's more of he doesn't want to love her, but he does, and then in this book, we have this struggle in himself of, I don't like you because of your connections and this, but those fine eyes though, he just has to, and then in the end, the fine eyes conquer the lack of connections,
the problem is that I think a lot of people have never read Pride and Prejudice, they've only watched. And that's totally fine. The movie adaptations are great. But when you are in the book and you're seeing his struggle and his yearning, it's right. That's where you're ah!
Yes. Yes.
I'll say Gandalf is not, well, also Darcy is a human being, right? He makes mistakes. He communicates poorly and then has to try and like figure out how to communicate better. He's trying to make up for the things that he's done by doing other things to help out her family and show like, hey, that's actually not who I am. Like, I'm really sorry. Gandalf is unattainable. And like, no one is ever like sitting reading The Lord of the Rings being like, you know who I want to be like? Gandalf. Like, you're not gonna be. He's a wizard. You could sit there and be like, I want to be like Sam. I want to have character qualities that Sam has. I would like to know the split of male versus female voters.
I feel in addition to your comments on Mr. Darcy, I think part of the love for Mr. Darcy, just, you know, everybody loves Mr. Darcy. I feel like part of it is he realizes he's made mistakes, and he realizes maybe unintentionally he's giving off this, what's the right word? This
persona.
This persona of his pride. And maybe that's not necessarily who he is, but he has to realize, and part of that is Elizabeth shows him that he's giving off this persona of pride, and that's what people are seeing. And so he has to change that. He has to make changes in his life and in what he, you know, says and does to show that's not who I am. So I feel like that's part of why people love him, is because he, you know, struggles against his love for Elizabeth. And then she's like, if you had behaved in a more gentlemanly manner, and then he's just like, and then he makes a change.
Out here quoting,
you know?
She's like, you know what I would like to do is give you direct quotes from the books that I love so that you know that I really love them.
Caroline, I'm going to open this copy behind me where you can't see it. And I'm going to read it. You're going to tell me what page it's on.
I don't think I can do that.
That'll be the bonus content. So in the Montgomery region, we have an upset here. Both of these are actually upsets. Aragorn defeats Anne Shirley, the 12 over the 1 seed, 128 to 112. And then Robin Hood, the 11 seed, defeated Peter Pan, 146 to 86. And I'm just surprised by how far Robin Hood has come. And I didn't know, Mareena, if you had any opinions on why people love Robin Hood so much, because he's taken down, I don't know if he's just had an easy path, because he had Tom Sawyer, he had Ebenezer Scrooge, he had Peter Pan. No slouches, but apparently not, I don't know, not as lovable as Robin Hood. Do you have any thoughts?
I'm going to say something controversial yet brave. Both of these people made it through on pure sex appeal. They are just hot characters. Aragorn's hot, Robin Hood hot. Like, they're protecting people. They're out in the wild. They are good with weapons. Like, they're just sexy. Like, put them to the top. Right up there. That's all I have to say.
Caroline, did you think that Anne Shirley was going to lose to Aragorn? Like, my association with Anne of Green Gables is that it's a 4-hour movie. So whenever we were all sick with a cold as kids, my mom would just put the movie in and we could watch it for 2 hours and she could get work done. Not to say that TV raised me. My mom was a wonderful person, but I know Anne Shirley from the old Anne of Green Gables and Anne of Avonlea movies. Yeah, she's a little annoying, kind of like Emma, but she's a lot more lovable than Emma is. And yet here we have Emma in the Elite Eight and Aragorn defeats Anne Shirley. So I didn't know if you had any experience with these characters or if you're happy Aragorn is here.
I'm going to be again, I'm with you on the Anne of Green Gables. Is I watched this, when I was 10, when I was a kid. Like, I haven't read them yet. I haven't watched them recently, although my friend and I are like, we need to watch Anne of Green Gables. I feel like I remember having like a connection with Anne of Green Gables when I was younger, but obviously there has been some time and distance. So I was like, okay, Anne Shirley, yeah, like she's gonna go far. Everybody loves her, like, okay. And I'm another moment of complete transparency here. When I saw the name Aragorn on the bracket when I was filling it out, my friends have told me about this dragon series. That's
Thank
Aragorn.
you.
Okay, that was you too, right, David? So I'm filling out my bracket thinking this is the dragon person, whatever. I don't know. I've never read it. I didn't even. So I'm like, nah. And then I saw the first day of voting. I saw on the Instagram and I was like, oh no. I was like, I made a mistake because this dude is popular in the Lord of the Rings community and not at all who I thought it was. So looking at this matchup, Anne versus Aragorn, am I surprised? Maybe a little. I feel like this is another toss-up one. I mean, Anne Shirley is like a staple childhood character for a lot of people. And Aragorn is like Mareena was saying, he's Aragorn, So am I surprised looking now? No. Did I vote for Aragorn? No, I voted for Anne Shirley. But I'm also not surprised. So yeah.
Do we think the bracket champion is in this region?
Aragorn or Robin Hood? That's a good question. I don't know that I have an answer on that one. I don't.
Caroline says no.
I don't know. Maybe. If it's, I feel like Aragorn would pull out over Robin Hood if someone does emerge.
Sure.
Whoever
emerges.
So,
do you think Aragorn was seated too low?
Probably.
He's the high.
Jim Hawkins is 7th, and I would think Aragorn would be above Jim Hawkins.
Yeah.
Jim Hawkins in Treasure Planet.
With the shave.
We have to think, I guess maybe my problem is that I don't go to the OG, right? Like, there's so many iterations of, we've got now like the Lord of the Rings, there's only the book or the movies, right? But my head like tries to take in like all the different media that someone could have consumed about these characters and be like, how are they going to feel about that with this giant thing? Because there's always something when you're about to vote that you're like, okay, but that one movie that I loved as a kid to watch over and over again was some version of, like, I try and think of that in whole. And so there's a little part of me that thinks that Robin Hood could come out over Aragorn because there are more iterations of Robin Hood, but that can be good and bad, right? There have been very bad Robin Hoods. And there've been some really good ones. The Fox animated version of Robin Hood, excellent. But yeah, it's a toss up. I think the Aragorn in the end will come out over Robin Hood because I won't rehash my own point.
Yeah, you've made yourself very clear. Moving on. So for our last region, called the Austen region, we had Elizabeth Bennet defeating George Knightley soundly, might I add, 142 to 57. So surprised at that score. And then Atticus Finch upsetting Joe March, 107 to 92. Caroline, do you think the correct Austen person has advanced here? Elizabeth Bennet over George Knightley.
Okay, so when we got to this point in my bracket, I have Elizabeth versus Knightley. And I literally had to take a whole half day and just think about this. I'm sitting there in my biochemistry class, just like, Elizabeth or Knightley, like, and in my heart, I was like, I know Elizabeth is going to win this just because Pride and Prejudice is, I would say, just a more popular Austen novel, like Pride and Prejudice. You watch it, you read it, like a lot of people. Emma is just a little less, well known.
Like second.
So I knew Elizabeth was going to win, but I was like, I have to pick George. Like, I just have to, down in my heart. Am I surprised? No. Am I sad we had to come to this point? Yes, but I had Knightley winning it all, so.
Yeah, I had Darcy winning it all, so I should have known better than to think that he would defeat whoever Gandalf, but for some reason I thought he would. Mareena, you felt like maybe there were too many To Kill a Mockingbird characters. There were only 2, and one of them is still here. Do you think Atticus should have beaten Joe March? Like, is that a fair outcome, or do you think Joe deserves to be facing off against Elizabeth this round?
I don't actually have any great love for Joe March. I actually loved Little Men more than Little Women. I read that Little Men, the book, like a lot more than Little Women. Joe is who girls think they are, but who they never actually are. She's a little too wild for me, and just so, I don't know. She's a little too much for me. So Atticus is a much more reserved, moral character in a way. But I will say that I paused on this one when I was doing it, and there was some little piece of me that's like, oh, To Kill a Mockingbird is such a good book. It's a classic. I guess I should put forward another character from them. But I remember so little about it. Like, I truly can't, here's where I'm kind of like Caroline with Lord of the Rings, where I'm like, I did read it and I did watch the movie. I know that I did, but I can remember very little other than that Atticus is the dad and Scout is the daughter. So yeah, he was like an Aslan pick, right? Like, it just feels like, oh, Kim.
Yeah, what I'm noticing is that a lot of these characters that are left, maybe with the exception of Winnie the Pooh and Elizabeth Bennet, and I guess Robin Hood, but a lot of them that are left, the majority, the 5 out of the 8, are characters that are not in most of the books they're from. And it's almost like we get fatigued with the main character. We know all about them. We know everything about Frodo. We know everything about Samwise. Let's just pick somebody that is a little bit more mysterious. And I wonder if it plays into the idea and the theory that I have, where the less we know about a story character, the more our minds get to imagine it, and they get built up a little bit more in our minds. When we do our fictional character movie bracket, then maybe, characters that are less known about, like, some random Star Wars.
Yeah, it's like if you had put Boromir in this bracket in Lord of the Rings or Faramir, like, they would have been in my top 4 because I love those brothers. I think they're the best.
But would they have been as popular as Aragorn? See, I don't know that they would have made it as far as, because we know more.
It would be one of those things I would have an internal struggle, but the amount of time I've spent crying over Boromir's death pales in comparison to any amount of time I've spent thinking about Aragorn. So it's one of those things, like, what do I treasure more? And it would be Boromir at the end, just because of like the pure emotion that his character wrung out of me.
Well, we both, Caroline and I, have revealed that the pick that we had to win it all is gone. So I guess, Caroline, which one of these 8 characters left would surprise you if they won it all?
Maybe Atticus Finch, just because he's probably the one I'm least familiar with. I have not yet Kill a Mockingbird, so maybe it would surprise me in that way. Other than that, maybe Robin Hood or Winnie the Pooh would also maybe surprise me a little bit, but also not. So I think I would be the most surprised for Atticus Finch.
Yeah, because I think he has to get through Elizabeth and Aslan potentially,
Right.
in order to at least get to the championship. So, Mareena, who did you have picked to win it all? Did you predict who you thought was going to win it all, or are you just along for the ride?
David Burrell. I told you, I didn't print out a bracket. I don't have that kind of printer capabilities.
That's right.
Fill out a bracket. I'm just out here voting every day, trying to get my picks to the top. I don't know who they are until they show up on my screen. I'm like, all right, let me think about these two.
All right. So of these 8, who do you think it's going to be?
I would be surprised if Gandalf won. And I would be surprised if Atticus Finch won. I think it's going to be between, I would want it to be between Elizabeth Bennet and Aragorn, but I'm nervous that Winnie the Pooh, that little son of a gun, is going to get in there, and I'm mad.
There are a surprising number of Pooh fans.
Well, I mean, it's the nostalgia. It's nostalgia, and like it's now like now that you got Winnie the Pooh left, you're voting on all of Winnie the Pooh. So if you love, and I'm sorry, I was a full teenager watching Piglet's Big Movie like religiously, like the Heffalump movie, one of my faves. I think 17, like. There is a lot of nostalgia in that. None of it for me is connected to Winnie the Pooh.
Well, there are a surprising number of people that send me the party emoji whenever Winnie the Pooh advances. I just am so surprised. Like every time I get a party emoji, and they're celebrating names. Pooh. Yeah, yeah. I need to divide male and female. I have made judgments about my friends based on these bracket competitions throughout the years, because I can see how they voted and I've gone, oh, interesting. And then people that I wasn't expecting to participate. And I'm like, wow, I didn't know that you would care this much about this thing that I'm doing. The last question I have for both of you is, what is a book from this bracket that you would recommend that if someone is out there that has never read it before? Caroline, I know you brought several books to the table. You can recommend all of them, but pick one at least to go into depth and give us like your sales pitch.
Okay. From the bracket, I'm not gonna sales pitch these, but I'm just gonna say read them. Read Emma. Emma's so good. And then the Scarlet Pimpernel. Okay, great. But for all of my fellow Jane Austen fans, yes, Sanditon, which is one of Jane Austen's unfinished novels, but my friend who's named Another Lady, who I think her name is actually, let's see, she has it written. Okay, her name is actually Marie Dobbs, but it's there's a lot of different completions of this novel. Jane Austen started writing this before she died, so she only got through like 11 chapters before she died. But Another Lady has come by and has finished it splendidly, and has done a great job. I have it marked in my book where Jane Austen stopped writing, but other than that, like if there was no like notes of where it was, like you wouldn't be able to tell, in my opinion. I think she finished it very well, and the characters are extremely lovable. Charlotte Haywood is an extremely lovable character, and it's a completely different setting, seaside, and it's so much fun, and you really get to look into Charlotte's mind, and she is very different from all of the other Austen characters. Of course, she has the wit of them all, but the way her mind works is very different, and it's just a great book. Read it. Sanditon, if you love Jane Austen, please. Sanditon by Jane Austen and Another Lady. Great book.
I am blown away. Is that the actual name on the front, is Jane Austen and Another Lady?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And in the back, the author wrote like a little note. It says an apology from the collaborator. And she's basically saying like her mindset in finishing it. She was like, the characters were all there, like the setting was great, like all of this. And then at the end, she's like, the only thing missing was Jane Austen writing herself. And like, she's like, I'm sorry, I didn't do as good of a job, but it's like, girl, you did great. Like, so
I am blown away. This is a wild card pick.
Long. I think it is a bit of an easier read than some of Austen's other novels. Like I enjoyed reading this more than Mansfield Park. Like it's good. It's good. If you enjoy Jane Austen, read it.
Mansfield Park was one of my favorites to read.
Was it? Okay, so
because
I don't know.
It was like I knew how it ended, and I still found myself being
Yes.
worried it was going to end the other way during the
True.
book. And for some reason, I was like, she's good. Like, she got me, and I already knew the end.
Well, our Jane Austen podcast will be coming to you very soon, featuring all of the people that love Jane Austen. Mareena, what's a book that you would recommend that people read? I know you've talked about many that you love, and you're welcome to recommend any from this list, or you can pull a Caroline and just go way off script and find a book that 3 people have written together. 2 of them are dead. You know, it just doesn't matter.
I've got just such a book. Based on my love for Edmond Dantes, I would always recommend The Count of Monte Cristo. I remember reading that book. I remember how I felt reading that book. And it just is like, your heart is racing. It's so interesting. It's just, I love books where you read it and you're like, wow, the author is so smart because she's like weaving this tale for me. Or he. It's written by a guy. I just assume all authors are women. Sorry. It's just so interesting. You feel mentally stimulated the whole time you're reading it. It's just so fun to read. I am going to be the worst and actually recommend, Caroline, that you not read Lord of the Rings. It's a lot, and I will say that as a speed reader, it was the most frustrating book of my life. Books, I read them and it was so hard. I felt like I had to read every single word, and even then I was annoyed. It was never fast enough. I just like literally quicksand getting through those books. Just watch the movies again, and then I'll draw you a diagram of the characters and you'll be good to go.
We could just watch them together again.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm thinking. And then I'm trying to think, there's at least one other one that Scarlet Pimpernel, obviously. Les Mis is such a giant book, but there is something to be said for reading it. And I really enjoyed my time reading it. I could, as long as you've watched the movie, I love doing this with classics, is just watch the movie first. Get an idea of the storyline so you have something to anchor your mind on. And so if you've seen the movie or the play, you can slowly make your way through it. And it's just very interesting, and the characters are engaging. And I really enjoyed reading that book, even though it is so big.
I love it.
Find Ramona Quimby. Ramona Quimby is my
Yeah.
childhood favorites.
You gotta love Ramona. The one I'm going to recommend this time around, it's my podcast, so I get to recommend one every time, is To Kill a Mockingbird. And I'm going to tell you my To Kill a Mockingbird story as my reason for recommending you read it. When I was in high school, I had a lawn mowing business, and I started out by just knocking on all of my neighbors' doors and saying, I would like to mow your lawn for a very small sum of money, and I'm getting ripped off. And they said, of course, we would love to rip you off and make you work hard and give you nothing in return. So I spent my summers doing that in Missouri. And one of the people whose doors I knocked on, her name was Susanna, and she was a public school teacher in the Kansas City area. And she was a Cubs fan. She was always wearing her Cubs sweatpants, Crocs, t-shirts. Everything was the Cubs, and also Oklahoma. So when we would go in the fall to do breaking leaves and stuff, she'd have her Boomer Sooner shirts on, and she'd be watching the game, coming out and telling us the score, Big 12 country. She asked me one time, she's a school teacher to the core. So she was very invested in me, how I was developing. She found out I was homeschooled. She was a little concerned that I was going to be weird. Turns out I already am. She wanted to know what I liked to do as a hobby. And I told her I liked to read. So she asked if I had ever read her favorite book, To Kill a Mockingbird. And I said no. And she was appalled, shocked. And the next time I saw her, she had a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird in her hand that she gave to me, said, you need to read this book. So I did. And then I read it again. And then when I saw her the next time, I was able to talk to her about her favorite book. And what I'll say about To Kill a Mockingbird for me is it helped me take my first step towards understanding another person's perspective and another person's interests and another person's concerns and another person's passions. Not that I adopted every single thing in To Kill a Mockingbird. It's obviously an amazing book. It's very influential. It has many good moral things in it. It obviously is not my favorite book of all time, but learning to have that mindset when I'm given media from other people and given content, I'm given their favorite things, I think has been beneficial, and I think would be beneficial for our readers, because there's also that idea in there of considering others, considering their perspective, and taking that into account as you live out your life, which I think is what we're all called to do as believers. And so I think that is why I would recommend you to read To Kill a Mockingbird, and then go watch it, because it's got I can't even remember his name right now. Gregory Peck, the insurmountable Gregory Peck. And if you watch it, notice that the film is filmed from the perspective of Scout. So adults are filmed looking up at them and children are filmed face on. And so you actually have the experience of going through that world as Scout. That's what something important the filmmaker did during the process of filming that movie.
So you voted for Atticus is what you're telling us. I'm kidding. You don't have to reveal how you voted.
Well, I actually did vote for Atticus over Joe. I didn't vote for Atticus in some of the previous rounds, but I do think he does deserve to beat Joe. Does he deserve to beat Elizabeth? People are deciding right now as they're listening to this recording of this episode. They're voting. So we will find out in a week from this episode releasing who made it to the final four. Caroline and Mareena, thank you guys so much for coming on this episode of the podcast. This was great. And like I said, if we decide to have a book-themed episode or a book-themed series, I will be hitting you up again, hitting you up on Facebook, hit you up on your text messages and just saying, hey, come give your opinions. Any last words before I cut the stream?
I mean, next time, let's do it in person.
I second the motion.
Once again, thank you to Mareena and Caroline for joining me on this episode of the Creative Community Podcast. I really enjoy these conversations with people like you who are listening about the things they love, about the books they love, about the movies they love. My goal and Mark's goal with all of this is to help you have conversations about the things that you love. And if it's art, if it's music, if it's books, if it's movies, whatever it might be, if it's just straight up storytelling. So if you want to be involved in our community, follow us on Facebook and Instagram, Destination Arete, Arete. That's where we post snippets of conversations. That's where people have been voting in this bracket that you see. Every March we do this all out, 64 things going head to head. And then if you want to be the first to know about things we're doing, for instance, people listening to this episode that are subscribed to the newsletter know the details about a very special thing that's happening in April of 2022. So if you want to be one of those people, destinationarete@gmail.com or destinationarete.com/contact. 2 ways to sign up for the newsletter. You have no excuse. Go do it. And so I will see you guys in a week with a recap of the Elite 8 of the 5th annual Destination Arete March Madness Bracket Challenge. I'll see you then.